Welcome back, Garage Heads. I'm Stephen Pancratz for I'll Be in the Garage, and I'm making a record storage thing. Okay, we've got this nice front room that my wife has decorated largely with my cool art, and now I get to add something homemade to corral our vinyl, dangle lights from, and tie the room together. Let's get building, but first, please enjoy the new intro. So this video unintentionally has two phases, Orthanc and Barad-dûr, but only because we're talking about a tale of two towers. My original idea was built around a few bold design choices, namely, to use cheapo 2x8s that I plane and shape and glue to look like nicer stuff, and then to use clever joinery to avoid using any kind of fasteners. Sounds clever, but my skills were not quite yet up to the task. I'll show some of the work and clarify some takeaways or major learning experiences that I gained. First, don't be hasty. Hoorah room! I did a bunch of good work and ruined it by stopping at 90% or being satisfied with 90% for a project that demanded precision and exacting eye for detail, and I got punished for it. Second, I was lazy with my tools. I let my table saw cut off vertical because I wasn't sure how to change its angle stops, and I should have figured that out before cutting a bunch of rhombuses, which were not squares. I also was lazy about using the sharp side of the blades in my planer, and lost a lot of time babying my boards through with tiny incremental thicknesses when I should have just sent them with sharp blades. Lastly, it hasn't come back to bite me yet, but because I used construction grade timbers from the Despot, even though I picked the lightest and thus driest boards I could find, their water content is probably unacceptable and will lead to warping as they air dry and weird changes to my finish in the process. With those shameful errors exposed, I can talk about some of the fun risks I took and how that made me a better woodworker. Credit here to Four Eyes for saying something about how, when you're thinking about what to do for a next project, to do something that scares you. For me, that was using the planer, using hard wax finishes, and attempting a fastener-free joinery project. The first two paid off, but on the second go-around, I had simplified the project to a point where fasteners were needed again. I'm not afraid of a more industrial look with exposed screw heads, and more importantly, neither is my wife, so no big. Let me show you the first attempt and what I had in mind. I wanted to plane these cheap boards down, rip 4 uprights, and use glue to make double width shelves. I needed 3 shelves of 20-ish inches length, 16-ish width, and like the uprights, 1¼ inch thickness. The uprights were to be like 54 inches tall. The shelves would alternate which pairs of sides they'd overshoot, with the uprights being about 16 inches apart. The shelves would be inset by 1/4 inch into the uprights, which was universal. All insets were 1/4 inch, so all overhanging material would be a nice round inch. If you're counting, upright needs a 1/4 inch groove that's 1¼ wide for each shelf. To cinch it together, I wanted supports under each shelf as well, which I called chopsticks for no particular reason, of similar dimensions, 20-ish inches long, 1¼ square. These would live in matching grooves under each shelf, run perpendicular to the shelves they're supporting, and slot into a little recess on the uprights. To make it even more mind-bending, the first 2 shelves, bottom up, would have the chopsticks be outside the uprights, and the last level would have them inside. This way, the uprights would be fully captive and wedged into place. Very snug, very ambitious. Let's see some of that construction for the joy of tools. Well, that didn't go so well. The ugly tower lived in the garage for about a week as I thought about how to burn it, because the garage is the final resting place for projects that aren't house grade. I already mentioned the lessons I learned, and while I want to try fancy joinery again sometime, I decided this wasn't the project for it. My wife also didn't like the chunky look of the tower with its wide dimensions, overhanging shelves, and sticky outy bits, so we went with a fresh new approach. 4 shelves, not 3, starting nearer to the ground. Flush ends to match the uprights on shelves and chopsticks, and screws. Having the shelves going the same direction, all the chopsticks on the inside, and using fasteners took a lot of the wait, was I supposed to do that? Out of the building process, so I could sink into the work without doing constant fit checks or second guessing my cuts. Use the ruler, stupid. I mean, I still did fit checks, but with a less constrained project, they didn't feel so high stakes. I stuck with using a hard wax finish, even though I hadn't gotten as far as trying it on the new original tower, and it was super fun. Once the boards were sanded and ready for stain, I threw on a few coats of boiled linseed oil, wiped off between coats, and waited a few days before I wiped on the paste wax to seal. More time consuming than polyurethane or whatever, but less trash, less bad smell, much easier to handle parts between layers, and best of all, because it isn't tacky, you can do both sides of a part and put a wet side down on your work area and not worry about it sticking. Heaven. AAA+++++ would recommend. It actually smells good, like pine sol or something. The final result of round 2 was much more satisfying. I had reset the angle locks on my table saw, so my uprights were actually square, or at least much closer to it. Similarly, the boards I had glued together to make my shelves were flat, because they were pretty true before glue up. Leah isn't a huge fan of the pinky yellow color of this cheapo fur, but this ended up being about $40 of wood, with lots of offcuts left for my son to make his own shelving unit outside. I'm giving myself a B for this one overall, with honorable mention level merit for tenacity, knowing when to quit and start over, and learning along the way. I hope you enjoyed, and if you do, like is spelled L-I-K-E, and to subscribe, just type your social into the comments, or hit the button if that's easier. Thanks for watching. I'll be in the garage.